another nephew of E.F. Spence, one of the founders, had a large orange grove on South Myrtle, beginning about the 1600 block. It might have been several blocks wide, but it also might have extended east to perhaps California. So it was a good-sized orange grove. He lived on the property, and his packing house was also at the Santa Fe Railroad. And I believe that C.O. Banks succeeded him because there is a orange crate somewhere, an orange crate label that is stamped indicate that it was a successor to E.F. Spence. His main brand, of course, was the Golden Harp.
It succeeded him as a farmer or as a...
As a grower.
Uh-huh, okay.
Right. Trying to think of a few more. You know, there were smaller groves, maybe not less than an acre in size.
What proportion of Monrovia in pickup point in time was taken up with orange groves?
Maybe 50% at the highest amount. I mean, if you look at that part of Monrovia north of Foothill, going all the way up to the foothills, and assuming that that was almost all orange groves, which it probably was, a lot. Maybe 50% is a little high, but certainly 40%. Another interesting orange grove was the one set out by the Mrs. Dr. Bucknell. Now, her house was at 167 North Mayflower. It's still there, and she owned the property from there all the way down to Foothill or White Oak. When she had her grove planted, she decided she would plant deciduous fruit as well. So she had the regular grid of orange trees, and then in between that grid, she planted plum trees. So she had both evergreen and deciduous fruit at the same time growing.
And there was General Piles.
And I don't know how large a grove he had, but it was certainly, his would have been the property from Mrs. Dr. Bucknell's north to Hillcrest or Banana, and that was all planted as well.
What about other crops? Avocados?
Avocados. William Chapelot was a Britisher who came to Southern California in the 1870s, because he appears in, I think, Thompson and West's 1880 History of Los Angeles County. He had his own nursery in probably the 1800 block of South Mountain in Duarte. But through the Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C., he obtained seeds of an avocado that had been discovered in Monterey, Mexico. He asked for and received several seeds, which he sprouted and developed the Chapelot avocado, which exists in some variety today. Apparently it's still obtainable from nurseries. But he was the one, I believe, who introduced the idea of growing avocados to this particular area. The early groves probably went out, or set out, maybe early 1900s, teens, 20s. And in time, there were large avocado groves as well.
And do we have any of the later generations of those same trees here? There are a lot of avocado trees that the bears are enjoying. Are those from some of those early?
They might be. I don't, I haven't traced it. I know a couple of years ago, as I say, you could still get a Chapelot avocado. Also, another variety that was developed in Duarte was the bacon avocado.
To be eaten with bacon?
Named after the family whose surname was Bacon. And that variety, I believe, is still available as well. Now, supposedly, at one point in time, someone said, oh, the Chapelot, the original avocado tree still exists. And I said, no. I mean, the grandson of William Chapelot talked about it being alive in the 1940s, but apparently it died at some point. However, descendants of that original tree are probably around.
And what about oranges? Do we have any, do you think we have any of the early oranges left growing around the city?
There might be a few. I don't know what the lifespan of an orange tree is, maybe 75 years in terms of good production. I know that one of the reasons that the orange groves of Duarte were so susceptible to being divided and housing tracts put in the 1940s is, pardon me, that those orange groves were reaching the end of their useful lifespan, and most of those orange growers did not have the capital to completely replant. And if they had a developer knock on the front door and say, I'll give you X number of dollars for your 10 acres, that made sense to them to do that, rather than to try to keep growing at a huge expense of replanting their groves.
And other crops that were prolific around here, anything major?
Truck farming. Now the Japanese...
What farming?
Truck farming. The Japanese were very adept at growing vegetables. My great-aunt Margaret rented some of the property she owned to a Japanese gentleman who grew probably vegetables in Duarte. And then there was the family, the strawberry king of Monrovia. Come on, help me with the name. Ueda?
Ueda.
300 block.
Of?
West Huntington Drive. The family lived in a house and they had a roadside stand behind where they lived, but they utilized all the available area, open area around to grow strawberries. And that's hence the name, the Strawberry King. He came to work on the construction of Pacific Electric and then stayed and began growing strawberries probably in the teens and 20s and grew them at least into the 1940s and possibly later.
And what about walnuts?
Those were a little further south. By south, let's say south of Duarte Road, I think was where the walnuts might have been. There was also the Pioneer Nursery, which was at Duarte Road and Myrtle. And they would have provided orange trees, probably later on avocado trees, as well as other plants for homegrown, for people who wanted to have homegrown varieties of things.
And Betty Fisher Thomas, I think it is, has told the story of the folks who lived on fig growing all kinds of...
Right. I mean, what'd she say? Chickens, geese?
There were animals and then they had vegetables.
Vegetables, right.
So all kinds of, it was like a little farming community there.
Yeah. I think, you know, the land was probably really good for growing things like that. Again, alluvial soil. And who knows? I'm trying to remember somebody told me once that they put in a garden in what had once been a chicken yard. And her comment was, you never saw vegetables the like of that.
So this was a very productive place agriculturally.
It was.
And I remember reading in the old newspapers about people bringing in the largest grapefruit from their crop and to share it, and then
and watermelons. William Monroe's father, I guess, grew watermelons on the C.O. Monroe property, and I took one in and gave it to the editor of the local newspaper as an example of what you could grow in Monrovia. Huge watermelon.
in the hopes that he would write about these things.
Probably,
yeah.
right. Trying to think of other things that grew. Oranges, avocados, strawberries, other, what you'd find on a truck, like
What's a truck farm? What is it?
Oh, just where you would grow vegetables. On a wholesale growing, as opposed to a kitchen garden. This would have been on a much larger scale. The goal being to provide households with freshly grown vegetables. So Arcadia was famous for chicken ranches, or infamous, depending on how you look at it. But Monroe, and I think they probably had citrus as well. As far as I know, Monrovia did not have extensive chicken ranches. They did, there was a hog ranch in Duarte, but I don't think there was anything
we have
comparable to
the
that.
Heidemann Poultry Ranch. Linda Markmiller's family had a...
That's right, on South Magnolia.
Heidemann, am I remembering the name correctly?
Not sure, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yes, probably not on the same scale as Arcadia, but yes, they grew chickens.